So now we've looked at how we control carbon dioxide levels, let's talk about how we regulate blood pressure. And there are certain similarities we can use here, because in essence, if you kind of follow the previous one, there are some real similarities we can use from that learning to apply to this learning. We saw previously that we had something which was a receptor. We've still got a receptor / detector involved in this. It doesn't detect carbon dioxide, now it detects pressure. And we call those baroreceptors. Baroreceptors. Where do we find them? Well, it's kind of easy, because we find them in exactly the same position that we found the chemoreceptors. We find them in your aortic arch, and we also find them in your carotid sinus, in the carotid artery leading to your brain. So we measure blood pressure here, internally, and we also measure it coming out of the heart. So just in the same way that you might do this externally using a blood pressure cuff, you automatically, every single second of the day, continually take your blood pressure. So who is that telling? Where does this information go to? So this information that you are taking from these little detectors that you find in your aorta and also in your carotid artery, we send that information to a centre in your brain. And just to make it easier for you, that centre is in the medulla oblongata, the very same centre that we talked about before. So these little detectors, these receptors that detect blood pressure, basically send information from detectors that you have in your aortic arch and also in your carotid artery, and they send that blood pressure reading through to the medulla oblongata in your brain. And they are doing it continually, whether you are awake or whether you are asleep. All the time that information is going to here, all the time. Without you even knowing about it, it's happening right now. So, we now know that you basically monitor your blood pressure every single moment, every second of every day. You don't need to think about it because it's automatic, okay? And we know that the baroreceptors are those detectors that are constantly measuring your blood pressure. We know now that they are sending a signal to a control centre, the medulla oblongata, which is in your brain. Boom. So these are two really, really important slides. These are the slides I really want to concentrate on, the ones that I've shown you. But everything on this slide, which is either in red or in bold, is kind of really important. Because in your report to me, what I want you to be able to show is that you understand the sequence of events as to what happens when blood pressure is too high, and then what happens when blood pressure is too low. Everything that you need is on these two slides and the ones that I've just shown you. So let's just talk halfway through what happens when blood pressure is too high. You are constantly measuring your average arterial pressure. If that average arterial pressure that you are measuring on your aorta or your carotid arteries starts to go too high, what we now need to do is bring it back down to normal. How do we do that? Well, we know those messages go from your aorta and your carotid arteries to the control centre. So those signals, those electrical signals through nerves, come into your brain. But what does that centre then do? It sends messages out, but where do those messages go and what do those messages do? Okay? So your cardiovascular control centre will respond when blood pressure is too high by decreasing sympathetic, the accelerator activity, and increasing parasympathetic brake activity. What does that really mean? It means that the cardiac centre is going to send messages out to your heart, and it's going to send messages to your blood vessels, both arteries and veins. What's it going to say to your heart? What do you think the message will be to your heart? Well, the message is simply going to be, don't beat as quickly. Blood pressure is already too high. We want blood pressure to go down, so we kind of want cardiac output to go down. So these signals coming from the control centre are going to decrease your heart rate, the number of times your heart beats in a minute, and it's going to decrease the stroke volume, the amount of blood you force out with each beat. as a result of which cardiac output is going to go down. In addition to that, it's also going to produce a dilation of your arteries and your veins, key arteries and key veins. In other words, the arteries are going to expand and the veins are going to expand. The muscle is going to relax. As a result, the lumen, the hole in the artery, is going to get bigger. If it gets bigger, the pressure basically drops. So as the pressure drops, it basically means your blood pressure drops. So when we get arterial and venous vasodilation, we get what is called a decrease in what we call our total peripheral resistance, TPR, which means effectively what that means is pressure in your blood vessels goes down. Net result, blood pressure returns towards normal. Heartbeat slower, cardiac output is slower, total peripheral resistance basically is going to decrease, which means your your blood pressure gets reduced. When blood pressure is too low, we start to reverse what we've just seen. This is just a reversal of what we've just seen. Blood pressure is now falling below normal, which means that baroreceptor activity decreases. What does that mean? It means that the rate of firing of these baroreceptors in your carotid arteries and also in your aorta starts to decrease. Your control centre interprets that as blood pressure's going down. Blood pressure is going down further than we want it to go down. This time, your control centre sends information to the rest of your body, but now it's doing something completely different to what it did before. Now it's basically increasing sympathetic activity. It's speeding things up. Okay? What does that mean for the heart? For the heart, it's going to send a signal to your sinoatrial node that basically says, I want you to beat faster and I want you to pump more blood out with each beat. In other words, cardiac output is going to go up. As well as that, it's now going to change the way in which your arteries and your veins, the diameter of them, and now, instead of making them more relaxed when blood pressure is too high, it's now going to constrict them, meaning the lumen is smaller, meaning that blood pressure in the pipes is going to go up, which effectively means you get an increase now in total peripheral resistance. The net result of both of these things is blood pressure returns towards normal. So everything that you need to tell me to get the best possible grade is really on these last few slides. This slide, and also those previous two. Everything that you need. Bish bash bosh, chicken dinner, it's a winner.